Hey guys, welcome to our next session from the Salesforce Drillers team. And today's session is gonna be all about the Salesforce Lightning Design System or SLDS, which is like a standard CSS library that is used in the development of your Aura components. So in the last session before this, we understandably looked at how CSS works at a broader level in your Aura components, so that now we can look into the Lightning Design System and how that system or framework is used to apply CSS in your Lightning components. So this Salesforce Lightning Design System or SLDS is a CSS library. So what we mean by a CSS library is that it gives us a collection of already defined classes that can directly be used in our Aura components. So it works like any other CSS library, like your Bootstrap and stuff like that. So this was introduced by Salesforce to give developers a more generic way to design their Aura components, and this CSS library automatically takes care of stuff like responsiveness and mobile friendliness and things like that in your Aura components. So right now, let's take a look at the official website of the Lightning Design System, which is right here, www.lightningdesignsystems.com. So if I open this up, this is the standard website for the Salesforce Lightning Design System. And under this website, you can see like component blueprints and how they define the classes for certain things. They give you examples as well, like classes names and stuff like that. But before looking into actual blueprints and things, let me rewind back a little bit and give you what is the naming convention or how do we use SLDS. So obviously, since the framework is called SLDS, every CSS class in this SLDS library is prefixed with an SLDS tag. So what I mean by that is, if I create a new Lightning component and call it SLDS example, let me do that right now. So you have this component right here. So let's say I create a div here, right? And again, I'm going to apply a class to it. So these classes are what will be used from your standard SLDS library. So every CSS class in that library is appended by an SLDS. You'll have the term SLDS, then maybe a dash, and then your class name. So this SLDS button will represent a single CSS class, right? But before even that, SLDS uses what we call a BEM or block element modifier naming convention. And how this works is a little important to understanding your SLDS classes in detail. So the way BEM naming convention works is, again, the full form of BEM is a block element modifier. So the way it works is that you have three core things. First one is your block, then is your element, and then is a modifier. So let's take an example of a car. So a block represents to the main thing or our entity. So we can take a car as a block example in the BEM naming convention. And then the element, the second thing, represents a subpart of our block. So we could have like a door. So our door would be an element of our block, which is our car, right? And nomenclature wise, we have the block name first in our BEM naming convention, and then we have a double underscore, and then we have the element name. So this car double underscore door, this represents that this car is a block, and then this door is a part of that car, right? We can have one more variation into these double dashes. So usually we don't want to use this. I mean, since this double dash is used to represent an element, which is part of this block, let's say we want to represent a mirror or a rear view mirror on a car store. So instead of using something like this, dot car double underscore mirror, we just use dot car double underscore door and a dash and a mirror. Since using these underscores repeatedly like this is not the best practice. Or instead of using a single dash, sometimes we see the usage of a double dash, right? So that's like how our elements work in the BEM. And then the modifier is what changes the actual properties of our element. So let's say our car has a pink door, right? So an element is represented by double underscores, and then a modifier is represented by a single underscore. So if you see something like car double underscore door, that is your block, it has the element of a door, and then that door is pink in color. So you'll see car underscore door and a single underscore and then pink, right? So what this BEM basically does is, by following this BEM architecture, you could easily look at an SLDS class name and be able to figure out what that SLDS class does. So that's all there is to the BEM naming convention. So let me just show you guys a little bit about it in action. So let me go back to the official website of a Lightning Design System, and let me open up an example for forms. Right here, a form element. So you see right here, you see a class being used here as SLDS dash form dash element, then a double underscore, and then a label. So this, by looking into this and seeing that it follows BEM, we can show that our block here is the SLDS form element, and then the label is the element to which our CSS is being applied, right? Something like this. This is how we identify what each SLDS class does based on this BEM naming convention. Now actually coming over to SLDS classes. So SLDS classes look something like this, like SLDS form element, then you have an SLDS form element label. These are like all defined in the standard framework, right? So now the question arises, can I just use this SLDS class right here and have it work directly? So let's take an example. Let me take the example from our website, and let's create a simple lightning input right here. Or even better than that, what we can do is yep. So I'm gonna copy this. What this is so this is a component blueprint to display a form like this. You see the form label, placeholder text, right? So we're just gonna use this in our lightning component. So this is like really generic, simple HTML which has SLDS classes applied to it. So you have a div, then you are applying this SLDS class to it, right? So I'm gonna save it out, and then I'm gonna create a new application to view it. Again, just like we have done with all the other examples. And then I'm gonna put my component in here, SLDS example, and then I'm gonna preview it. But you'll see something interesting here, that when I preview it, it shows up like normal HTML. The SLDS classes don't seem to have applied, because if we check how it looks here, you see like this with a blue outline and stuff. But if I go back to our actual application preview, it doesn't look like that at all. So the reason behind that is, I mean, since this is a library, but it is not defined anywhere in our controller. So there is some way that this library will be loaded up into your Aura component. It could be with an external file, or there is supposed to be some way that this this library is loaded into your component. So what happens is, if I create an Aura component and put it directly in my Lightning view. So when I'm in my Lightning view, this SLDS library is automatically loaded up in the browser. But what happens is, if I'm using an application, this SLDS library is not loaded up by default in your application, and you have to explicitly load it up using this extends keyword and just put force SLDS. So what this will do is, this will load your SLDS CSS library by extending your application. Now if I go back and now if I see my application, now you see the CSS seems to have applied. Now this has a blue outline and stuff like that. So this is how you make sure that your application loads your SLDS library. Now another important thing is, since these applications are only used for developer previews, and they are not involved when you're actually using your Lightning or Aura components directly in your Lightning UI, so you don't need to do anything on the component level to load it out. What I mean is load out the CSS library on your Aura component. This workaround is only needed when you are previewing your component via an Aura application. So if I'm able to use this component directly in my Lightning UI, the Lightning UI already loads up the SLDS. So you won't need to do anything like this on your component level. You only need to do this when you are previewing your Lightning component within our application, right? Now, a couple of other interesting things about SLDS. So right now, the markup, whatever I pasted here, this is all standard HTML tags like divs, labels, and all that stuff. What if we use the Lightning frameworks tags like Lightning inputs, the way we have done right here? So instead of using this, I'm just going to use 3 Lightning inputs. These are not HTML standard tags, these are Lightning specific tags, right? And now if I go back and refresh it, you'll see the fields still show up with SLDS intact. So what that means is, if you are using Lightning tags instead of normal HTML tags, so all Lightning simple, or it could be not generally just Lightning, it could also be like UI inputs and stuff like that. So all of these, all non-HTML tags, which are Aura framework specific, they all have SLDS automatically applied to them. You don't need to explicitly apply SLDS to these components. So you could just use these directly and they will just show up with your SLDS applied. Now, once you know how SLDS works, like even if you want to use HTML elements in SLDS, you can easily do that. From a developer point of view, when you are building the UI, so generally how you work is, once you know what you want to build out from a graphical point of view, you go to the Lightning Design System website and look for the blueprint for that. Let's say maybe you want to use a breadcrumbs integrator, something like this. Yeah, you see a parent entity, parent record, like this. So you go back and look into the proper blueprint for it. In the blueprint, you should be able to see the actual sample code for it. But the good thing about it is if this breadcrumb has a actual Lightning component for it, so you'll see a link here called Lightning component. So you click on this and it'll take you to that standard Lightning components documentation of how you can use this. So you see that Lightning breadcrumbs is actually a standard Lightning component. So you are able to see it and you're able to see the documentation of how that works. And now you can just directly copy the implementation from here, put it on your component, and it works. You don't need to, you see, we have a breadcrumb component created here, so you don't need to worry about explicitly modifying CSS. I mean, applying your SLDS classes to it. So this is the best way to do it. Although there could be certain ways where you don't find a standard Lightning component for a use case and you have to build a custom component. In that scenario, you'll need to like apply CSS classes manually. So again, you can refer to the the Lightning Design System website to learn all about the classes. It's all here. There are all the examples, and it gives you the actual description for every class right here. So again, this is not something that if you don't have experience with CSS, you would be able to learn quickly, but you would be able to learn this quickly with practice when you implement CSS components with SLDS applied to them, like manual SLDS, CSS and stuff like that. But generally, as starter, as a beginner, I would recommend you guys that you go ahead, create some forms and some just normal looking pages with SLDS and try to use as much less HTML components as you can, and just try to use all Lightning framework tags because these already take care of SLDS for you. These are already mobile friendly and everything. So as soon as you avoid applying SLDS manually, you should be good. But if you need to, then obviously you'll need to go ahead and do it, right? So this is like all about your SLDS, the Lightning Design System. So you generally need to keep the Lightning Design System in mind when you build out Aura components. You don't want to write too much custom CSS. You just have to use SLDS properly, and your pages should be responsive, should be mobile friendly, it should have a really good looking view which mimics your standard Lightning user interface. So I hope you guys understand that's like a beginner level entry guide to SLDS, and I hope you guys practice it out a little bit, and we'll see you in our next session, which is gonna be on Lightning data services. So thank you guys and have a good day.